This is Elena Larson, Special Reporter. I'll be visiting with Dr. Ken Larson. Dr. Larson will be describing some material he is offering in video format that he believes will be helpful to those in ministry or Christian leadership. Our remote crew is ready. Good day, Dr. Larson. It's good to be with you again.
And thank you, Elena. I enjoy these visits with you. You usually have some good questions for me. I'm ready when you are.
Tell me what you are bringing to this conference.
From my experience, people often find themselves in positions of ministry and leadership based on natural gifts and talents. For many, this is sufficient for their roles. Sometimes, however, situations are encountered where the challenges exceed the experience and training of the person trying to help. I'm offering an introduction to some material that I believe is helpful to all of us in our personal lives and in our relationships and in our ministries.
What sorts of things are you covering in this video series?
Much of what I'll review is choice theory developed by Dr. William Glasser. Choice theory and its companion reality therapy offer a way to understand a bit more of why we do what we do, why we need each other in relationships, why some relationships work and why some don't. I'll also point to some ways that can be helpful in repairing relationships that are at risk.
So you see this material being useful to those in ministry and pastoral functions?
Yes, I do. Christian ministry is patterned after Jesus' ministry. He described himself as the Good Shepherd, come to bring life to those in his care. I'm thinking of John 10:10. Those who would serve others seek to emulate Jesus as the Good Shepherd. This involves being involved with people, helping them grow into their potential. Often, the focus of pastoral care is helping with relationships with the self, with God, and with others. Choice theory and reality therapy contain some wise and useful insights that can be very useful in this process. I recently heard a thoughtful statement about serving others. The comment was in a clinical context, but I believe it has application to pastoral care. The comment was, the best way to care for someone is to care about them. So these videos offer some useful tools to aid in the process of caring for and caring about those served by folks in leadership and ministry.
Are there limits to this format? It seems to me that just watching a video describing ways to help people isn't enough.
That is an excellent insight. What I'm bringing is an introduction to a conceptual approach to understanding human behavior. It's sort of like an introduction to the principles of aerodynamics. Knowing about the physics of flight does not enable you to fly. It does give you some understanding of what you need to do in order to get started towards flying. So I believe strongly that one of the foundation stones of solid growth as a person is study. The available truths that can be learned will keep us all busy for the rest of our lives. The challenge for us is to focus our study on the things that will work to build the kingdom, both within ourselves, with one another, and in our world. We need to know ourselves so that we can know one another and reach out to those struggling with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune in our beleaguered world.
How can someone develop the skills needed to use this material effectively?
I think the first step is to get a taste for what is offered. Does this material help in understanding ourselves and others? Is there a sense that this would be useful in helping people with troubled relationships? If there is perceived value in this material, then there are formal training programs that can be brought to your group. There are also ways to structure focus groups to study this material. Professional guidance is available to help in getting something like this started. This guidance could be limited to the startup process, or it could be used as ongoing facilitation to keep things rolling. In my professional life, I used to meet with a group of colleagues every month to study new developments in our profession and how to apply them in our care for our patients. It seems to me that a similar approach would be possible and helpful in ministry situations. The formal training would probably bring the greatest benefit, but the study club approach could be a low-cost alternative.
What benefits might be available to those who seek to understand and use this material? In other words, are there personal benefits to the helper as well as to those the helper cares for?
Self-control is one of the fruits of the Spirit, Galatians 5:23. Self-control is more than just turning down that second piece of pie. It involves understanding ourselves so that we can learn to regulate our lives in a healthy way. This self-regulation involves our actions, our thinking, our emotions, and our physiology. These things together are what Dr. Glasser calls total behavior. We'll go into this more deeply a bit later in this series. Realistically, this self-control, self-regulation is more of a process than an accomplished state of being. We can make progress, but rarely will anyone achieve perfection in self-regulation. Choice theory gives us useful explanations of the dynamics involved in understanding ourselves and learning to self-regulate. There is much that is known through science about how and why we behave and how our brain functions to direct much of our behavior. Gaining a deeper understanding of these discovered truths sheds light on aspects of our behavior that are often shrouded in simple ignorance. I believe the Lord wants us to seek to discover all that we can about His creation, including ourselves.
Some people see a conflict between what we know by faith through the revealed Word of God and what we learn through scientific endeavors. Would you address this? Perhaps give us some references that might bridge the gap between faith and reason?
That is an appropriate choice of words, Elena. I think a segment from the encyclical Faith and Reason might be relevant to our discussion. I'm going to quote from section 106 of the encyclical. Quote, "I cannot fail to address a word to scientists, whose research offers an ever greater knowledge of the universe as a whole and of the incredibly rich array of its component parts. So far has science come, especially in this century, that its achievements never cease to amaze us. In expressing my admiration and in offering encouragement to these brave pioneers of scientific research, to whom humanity owes so much of its current development, I would urge them to continue their efforts without ever abandoning the sapiential horizon within which scientific and technological achievements are wedded to the philosophical and ethical values which are the distinctive and indelible mark of the human person. Scientists are well aware that the search for truth, even when it concerns a finite reality of the world or of man, is never-ending, but always points beyond to something higher than the immediate object of study, pointing beyond to the questions which give access to mystery."
I like what he says about seeking truth through science.
Yes. My favorite line is that last one, that our ongoing quest for truth continues to point us to the mystery that underlies all of creation. What else did you want to ask me today? You look like you have something in mind.
Relationships are important to all of us. How does this material help in maintaining good relationships and repairing those that are disconnected?
We can start with what Dr. Glasser describes as our basic needs. These needs are genetically programmed. These needs are love and belonging, freedom, power, fun, and survival. Later in the series, I'll develop these needs a bit further, but for now, let's just focus on the first one, our need for love and belonging. Much in our culture encourages a focus on the independent self. I believe this is self-evident to any thoughtful person. This focus on the self can lead us to believe that we can get along without others. We can stand alone, raise children as single parents, separate ourselves from those we need if they don't conform to our expectations. The tragedy in this is that it simply is not true. We need to be in loving, connected relationships. This is as essential to good emotional health as basic nourishment is to our body. The sad result of this emphasis on the isolated individual is loneliness and disconnection from those we need.
Do you offer any insights into why there are so many lonely, disconnected people?
I believe that the underlying cause of this loneliness and disconnection is what Dr. Glasser calls external control psychology. This external control drives people apart and can destroy relationships. The fact that this is the predominant psychology in our world makes it all the more difficult to deal with.
Could you say more about this external control psychology that seems to be so destructive to relationships?
Sure. I'll just quote from the book Choice Theory. Quote, The seeds of almost all our unhappiness are planted early in our lives when we begin to encounter people who have discovered not only what is right for them, but also, unfortunately, what is right for us. Armed with this discovery and following a destructive tradition that has dominated our thinking for thousands of years, these people feel obligated to try to force us to do what they know is right. Our choice of how we resist that force is, by far, the greatest source of human misery. I call this universal psychology that destroys relationships because it destroys personal freedom. I call it external control psychology. The control can be as slight as a disapproving glance or as forceful as a threat to our lives. But whatever it is an attempt to force us to do what we may not want to do. We end up believing that other people can actually make us feel the way we feel or make us do the things we do. This belief takes away the personal freedom we all need and want. Another way to see the dynamics of external control is to consider the fable of the blind man and the elephant. Each of the blind men encountered a different part of the elephant, and they insisted to the others that their perception of their small part of the elephant was the right one. This tragically limited view kept them all from getting a better understanding of the whole elephant.
What are some ways that people can move away from external control?
The more complete answer to your question is the reason for what I'm offering in this video series. But I can offer the following as a very short course in applied choice theory. So let's just name what Dr. Glasser calls the 7 supporting habits. To a great degree, the meaning is clear from the words themselves. These habits are supporting, encouraging, listening, accepting, trusting, respecting, and negotiating differences. And then there are the 7 deadly habits that most of us learn early in life and often dominate the quality of our relationships with others to the detriment of those relationships. These 7 deadly habits are criticizing, blaming, complaining, threatening, nagging, punishing, and bribing or rewarding to control.
How do these things help with building personal connections?
By eliminating the 7 deadly habits, we stop driving a wedge between us and others. By learning to use the supporting habits, we have a better chance of connecting in a caring way.
You seem to be emphasizing the importance of knowing yourself. How does this square with the traditional Christian view that we need to die to ourselves?
Once again, let me cite a segment from Faith and Reason. Driven by the desire to discover the ultimate truth of existence, human beings seek to acquire those universal elements of knowledge which enable them to understand themselves better and to advance in their own self-realization. These fundamental elements of knowledge spring from the wonder awakened in them by the contemplation of creation. Human beings are astonished to discover themselves as part of the world, in a relationship with others like them, all sharing a common destiny. Here begins then the journey which will lead them to discover ever new frontiers of knowledge.
That helps. The focus seems to be on knowing ourselves in relationship with others.
That is it precisely. As we come to know ourselves in the ways that God intends, we come to realize the wonder of our connections with others. John Donne, the poet from centuries ago, understood this well when he stated, "No man is an island." The self that we need to die to is the isolated, separated, false self that is created by our inflated ego, which in turn is shaped by the siren song of the ephemeral values of consumerism and self-seeking satisfaction.
Thanks for this overview. I look forward to seeing more of what you are offering.
And thank you, Elena. I hope this very sketchy overview will whet the appetite of our viewers for more information. I look forward to working with you in the future.
This is Elena Larson, signing off.